So good morning, everyone. My name is Kristen Hovius. I am new to the Zoom and Google Meet workshops. And so I really appreciate your patience with me as I learn and build this new skill. I am going to attempt to share my screen right now. Oops. As I attempt to do this, I need to make sure that I am started with the slideshow. Yes, from beginning. Yay. All right, now I have something to share. Thanks for your patience. My work in the world, most importantly, like many of you on the call, I am a parent. And I am staying in and sheltering in with my children who are 11 and 12. So they're fifth graders and sixth graders. Navigating remote learning right along in the thick of it. And the work, why I'm really excited to be here today is because some of the skills and some of the tools that we're going to talk about today have made navigating this really extraordinarily stressful and challenging time possible to do with our mutual dignity intact. And I'm really excited to share this with you. So we're going to be talking about self-regulation and a different type of leadership that not only is effective with children in our care, but also other human beings in our care. So my name is Kristen, and the organization that I run is called SEL Chicago, which stands for Social Emotional Learning Chicago, and we help adults create mutually respectful environments with children. I want to make sure that I take a pause and do a land acknowledgement. In this space and in this time, the work, I'm literally almost on the banks of the Chicago River as it rains. I'm hoping that everything is fine. And these are the ancestral lands of the Potawatomi people, the Ojibwe tribe, and the Odawa tribe. And I want to honor their elders as we walk in this world. I also want to acknowledge a delivery acknowledgement. I'm new and growing my skills, and I'm so excited to connect with you. So as we are pausing, learning, reflecting, making sure that you might have a piece of paper and a pencil nearby, because you'll be asked to pause and reflect and then to share. And as you share, it takes courageousness sometimes to share with people that we don't know. It's easier to do that when we're in a room together, and I'm so excited to build the skills of sharing in a virtual room. So this work really begins with this idea that we are all doing the best we can with the skills that we have. Our children are doing the best they can. We are doing the best we can. Our teachers, our administrators, the district at large, we are being asked as human beings to pivot something incredibly quickly, and we are taxed in that. Our brains do not like change all that much. And sometimes when we don't know what's on the other side, it builds so much anxiety. It is not out of the realm of possibility, and it's extraordinarily understandable if you are really, really taxed with change right now. The focus in this session is to build awareness, both of our own, the adults' management of stress, talking a little bit about authoritative practices, and then shifting the behavior or lens, that behavior of our children and maybe behavior of other people in our world is communication. That's a different way of thinking about behavior in general. We are going to be talking about an anatomy-centered self-regulation opportunity for us to understand a little bit more about the brain and how it manages stress and how we can support our children as they navigate these. And then 3 steps for bringing calm to a tantrum. So I want to begin with a tool for your own personal physiological self-regulation. I'm going to ask you to focus on your breath, our precious, precious breath. As you drop into your body just for a moment, I'd like you to take a moment and think about your inhalation and your exhalation, the two different parts of physiological ventilation or breathing. And think about your inhalation and then your exhalation. And if you could make your exhalation lengthened and longer than your inhalation. Let's just do that for 3 cycles of breath. Think about exhaling along that red line so that it's long. Inhaling is relatively shorter, and then your exhale is long. And finish up 2 more cycles of breath. When we're talking about physiological self-regulation, often it can begin with us. If we can drop into our breath, if we can lengthen our exhalation longer than our inhalation, it helps reduce our heart rate. It increases oxygenation. It allows us to decrease our blood pressure. I think I might have said increase our heart rate. So it decreases heart rate, it decreases our blood pressure, and it actually increases physiological relaxation. It's something that we can do consciously to help us come into our bodies so that we can learn. SEL Chicago's guiding beliefs and the approaches, I want to make sure that I frame the conversation about why we're talking about this. We're all doing the best we can with the skills that we have. Our current skill level is based on our attachment history, our history of experiencing trauma and our resilience and how we were supported and are supporting ourselves in that recovery. Our developmental stage, meaning if we're thinking about childhood and how we grow, there are certain things that are possible at different developments. Our developmental difference, some of us who have a developmental difference are shifting in our skills in how we can manage and interact. And then our own personal state of self-regulation. Where are we? Are we emotionally agitated? Are we emotionally calm? How we look at the world is going to is going to change our skills in the moment. Learning new skills is always possible. It's a huge guiding belief for us. And then thinking about Adlerian psychology, where a lot of the work that I've been trained in, human beings seek belonging and significance in relationships. And when we don't have belonging and significance, we might behave in ways that try to get us that. We do best in mutually respectful relationships where we are encouraged and where mistakes are opportunities to learn and reflect. And then we're going to be talking about authoritative leadership, which is often a new term. SEL Chicago's guiding belief is that authoritative leaderships help adults model solution-focused communities. We support community member resilience and increase our protective factors against stress, and often helps us build a foundation for dismantling systems of oppression. Authoritative leadership to align us, if we think about this y-axis of demandingness and an x-axis of warmth and acceptance. If a leader leads with not a whole lot of warmth and very little structures, it might feel unresponsive or neglectful or absence of leadership. If we have lots and lots of demands, but we don't have acceptance for individual difference or individual needs, it might feel authoritarian in leadership. If we are really, really warm and accepting, but we have no structure, we have no limits, it's going to feel really, really permissive. So this sweet spot of authoritative leadership, demanding and accepting, is called authoritative. And it is firm boundaries and demands with warmth and encouraging support. When we can align authoritative leadership with restorative practices. And restorative practices are how we are interacting and building strong relationships where we can reflect and build skills and where mistakes are opportunities to learn. So similarly to authoritative practices, if we have low support and also low control, it's going to feel absent and people don't receive the skills that they need. There's a lot of control and low support, it's going to feel punitive. People are going to feel like things are done to them. Lots and lots of support, but not a lot of spaces for accountability. It's going to feel permissive, where we're doing things for people and where we are playing with, especially in our children and with our children as we want them to build skills, in a restorative relationship where there's lots and lots of structure, but not, but a high level of support and the ability to do things with people. I'll do something with you, but I'm not going to do something for you. I like to think about this as choosing the right tool for the job. So I'd like you to imagine a hammer and a screwdriver. And I want you to think about the right thing to use with a hammer. And if you thought about, a hammer should be used on a nail, and a screwdriver should be used on a screw. But I want to ask you a question. How many of you have had a hammer and you had a screw and you didn't have the screwdriver? What happens? What happens when you use a hammer on a screw? And take a moment to type a couple things in the chat box. Norma, as they come in, would you read them out?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So what happens if you've ever used a hammer on a screw?
I tried to nail it, but it doesn't work.
Yep. Anything else?
Lots of resistance.
Lots of resistance. Time for one more, if there is one.
I missed the nail.
There's one other thing that might happen. Like if you were using a screw to hang something up and you only have a hammer to get it into the wall, it might be effective for the time being. And then it does damage. And then you have a bigger problem when you have to move the picture. So I know that sometimes we use the tools that we have, but they aren't always the most effective tools for the job. The reason I like to bring up this thing called authoritative leadership is that we know, I'm not going to go through this research, but I am going to add this into the information for the slides. We know that when children identify the leaders in their sphere as authoritative, children do better. They have higher student, if it's a school, they have higher student engagement, less peer victimization. They do better. And we also know that we have higher academic success when in homes. So why is it sometimes difficult? It's a longer conversation, but when we are thinking about building capacity in authoritative responses, it often begins with our own personal awareness. And so today in this time that we have remaining, we're going to talk about the foundation, increasing our personal awareness, increasing our reflections and the actions of the adults. Then the structures. It is really important, as we are providing authoritative responses, that we are providing structures, routines, agreements, rhythms, systems. Our children, for many of our children, school provides that to us. And you'll notice that when in the first part of this pandemic and our response of closing schools, suddenly that routines and structures went out the window for children. And it went out the window for adults as we're trying to figure out and navigate a world where we are in our homes with our children if we can be. That warmth and connection is there for the in the moment tools and strategies that are applied with mutual respect. And when I made a mistake in the slide as I was building this. The warmth and connection, what it should say and what it will say when I send it out, the warmth and connection are the tools of connection so that when the structures need to be supported, they are supported in a way that feels like we're building relationship instead of pushing people away. And then the furnishings are the in the moment tools and strategies that we can apply with mutual respect. I also want to have one more acknowledgement because this is really important. I'm a nice white lady who lives on the north side of Chicago. I'm sheltering in place in relative privilege. And the world of conscious and positive parenting has been historically white. So a lot of the lenses that have been there have been through the lens of whiteness. So the conscious and positive parenting authoritative leaders of color who are really elevating this in a parenting perspective, conscious parenting time, parenting is political, Latinx parenting, and parenting decolonized are all Facebook groups. They have webinars. I'm sorry, I don't think they have webinars, but they are all doing podcasts to elevate this work through the lens of a non-white lens. And I think that's really important to both elevate. None of them are in Chicago, unfortunately. But I will be building and putting those into the messages and the notes for our sessions. So you can have those links. I'd like to have an opportunity to reflect. And this idea of authoritative leadership, an opportunity to write, if you have that piece of paper, or to think, and then we'll share what our thoughts are. What did you learn? How do you feel about it? And how might you be able to use this lens of authoritative leadership with children in your care? What did you learn? How do you feel about that? And how might you be able to use this information with children in your care? You can write it in the chat.
Kristen, might I ask you to repeat the context of the questions again?
Sure. When you're thinking about this idea of authoritative leadership, what did you learn? And how do you feel about it? Because sometimes it can be really different way of thinking about being with children. And if anyone would like to share, now is the time.
We did not get any responses back in the chat, so I'm wondering from our participants if they understood what is being asked of them in terms of understanding authoritative responses.
Well, you know what? Let me move forward this, because what I wanted to do was ground authoritative based on the conversation that if I didn't define it, then maybe it was going to be hard to have a conversation about the other pieces. But let's move forward to this idea of behavior as communication and see if that helps ground the conversation.
There is a question about maybe going back to the slide with the arrows.
Okay, I can do that. So if I go back to the slide with the arrows, what we're looking at is that this authoritative leadership is both firm and warm at the same time. Norma,
Yes.
I'm wondering if, because I can't see faces while I'm presenting, here's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering if we could think about this behavior as communication, and that might help draw forth the information that we're looking for, or or solidify the information that we're trying to provide. So if nothing's coming through the chat, it just means I believe that I need to be clearer in my questioning.
So maybe we could ask parents, do you need more information? Do you need more explanation about what authoritative means versus authoritarian? And I think there's few enough of us, and so yes, the response is coming across yes.
Okay, so let's think for a moment of.
There's a comment here: authoritarian is a battle that is ongoing, not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm. And also, when we are looking for new tools, right? Sometimes I believe that when we have this, we're trying to use the same tool on a challenge and we're not getting any effect, or we're not getting the outcome that we want, there are a couple things that we can do. We can try to use a new tool, but unless we change the frame and unless we change the use of the tool, we may not be able to get the effect that we want. And I see that Paolo says, it sounds like this is my battle. I want to move into this next piece because that will allow us to give some actual context to the tools that we're talking about. I know that you guys can see the slides. So close your eyes for a second, if you will, so I can magically get back to where we were. Okay. So if we're shifting to this idea that humans are seeking belonging and significance, and that is the root of behavior, that is also a shift. Because when we start to look at behavior as communication, instead of this behavior happens, so we make a judgment about the child or the other person because the behavior's there, the shift of the looking at behavior as communication really asks us to put on some new lenses. And authoritative leadership is often some new lenses. The action takes energy. So adults may be seeing, if we think about behavior as an iceberg, and children are showing us just the tip of the iceberg, they're showing us their behaviors. They might be asking for excessive screen time. They might be swearing. They might be showing us defiance or disrespect or ignoring. I'm going to share with you that every one of these things has happened in my house in the last 6 weeks. It was happening before, and it's becoming more intense. Whining, sneaking, refusing, fighting, tantrums. All of that is what's above the surface. With the behavior as communication, when we think about what children are feeling and what they might be feeling from a belonging and significance perspective, they might be feeling anxious. Their structure's gone. They might be feeling bored or helpless. They may be really coming up against lack of skills, not being able to organize the things that are coming through from their teachers. Emotional dysregulation, and that emotional dysregulation caused by grief or fear or worry. Powerlessness, misunderstanding. This worry about social status is especially true for our teens and our middle schoolers. And I just had a conversation with one of my middle schoolers this morning. He's at his computer trying to work on his schoolwork, but he doesn't know how to turn the notifications off on his computer. So he sees that his other friends are playing on a game that they share a server on. So that idea of fear of missing out is huge. If we're craving, if we're seeing this misbehavior, and that's the behavior we see, we often forget that or it might be new to us, that this is a child solution to a problem that we're not seeing. There's an opportunity when we shift that frame. If we're craving connection, we settle for attention. When we shift the frame, we start to look at reframing the behavior. So it's not that kids won't do something, but it's that they might not be able to yet. And then we can get really curious about things. We can help provide support, help them. We can either find and remove some of the barriers. If our children are younger, we can help them identify and give them some tools to remove their own barriers if they're older, and really helping them feel supported and strengthened versus maybe shamed for having the challenge.
We have a wonderful comment here from Diana that kids don't have the coping skills to let them get through the battles, especially when they lose their support team. And this is one of the things that she is dealing with as a parent. And the only support that our children have are us as parents, and perhaps a psychiatrist or a special ed teacher, because they have have lost some supports.
Diana, your comment really brings me to the thought of how we may be reacting as well, right? We're coming up against, as parents, so many demands on us that we may not feel that we have deep training and skills in. And so how might that color our responses, and be challenging for us? The demands on us are enormous. The piece that I want to share, and we shared a little bit about this in the conversation yesterday. So I'm looking at the time, and I would like to give one more piece of information before we have an opportunity to reflect. So I'm going to scroll through these slides. There's a book that I've written. It's a rhyming book for children to understand the brain. And some of what I'm going to share comes from the brain book. And so this rhyming children's book is written as a guide to teach self-regulation and co-regulation to adults. And it is helping describe the hand model of the brain. So if you take your thumb and you curl your fingers over your thumb, it represents, and you think about your fingers as purple, your thumb as blue, and your brainstem as red. The purple part of the brain is the cortex of the brain. It's the part that looks at the world with what can I learn and how can I solve this? It's the part of the brain that has all of our creative wisdom, our executive functioning tools, our ability to manage stress. What Diana said, those coping skills are developed over time in the cortex, and they're developed all through youth over a lifetime. So if we think about what ends up happening sometimes as stress comes to us, that ability to manage stress, we sometimes lose it. And when we think about, whether it's something small or something big, before my cortex knows it, it stops working when I flip my lid. And I think about this, and we can teach this to children with these little hand signs, taking your fingers and flipping them up. And when we are in a disintegrated emotional state, when our lids are flipped, our other parts of our structures, our other brain structures are managing our responses. And it's either the brainstem, where the essential question is, am I safe? And the tools are fight, flight, freeze, and faint. If you've ever had a child run away from you in that moment because they are not feeling safe in that moment, it's often uncontrollable, but it is literally a mammalian response, a mammal response to this answer to the question, am I safe? And the answer being felt is no. The limbic system is the other part of the brain that manages an essential question, am I liked? Am I loved? Do I like and love myself? As I come across something as a learner, if I'm not feeling that I can manage this, maybe what ends up maybe what ends up as I tell myself as a learner that I can't do this, blaming, shaming, name calling, defensiveness. If you've ever been in the presence of a child who called an assignment stupid or themselves, it often comes from this space. So when we are in and realizing that we have this capacity to manage stress or not manage stress, and in that state of not being able to manage stress well, we often, I don't know if you've ever yawned when someone yawned or cried when someone cried, but those are mere neurons at work creating connection ties. Because our brains, as social creatures, our brains are wired to connect, to reflect back what we see. And sometimes when your lid is flipped, it flips the lid in me. So this idea of we are wired to connect, and sometimes in the presence of our children's upset, we may get upset. Or in the presence of our upset, our children may get upset. So this is an opportunity to pause and reflect. In this context of the brain in the palm of the hand and the different parts of the brain, what did you learn? And what might be a first step that you might be able to take to make this meaningful in your relationship with the children in your care? So with the brain in the palm of the hand, and in the context of mirror neurons, the brain in the palm of the hand, what did you learn? And what might be a first step that you can take to make this meaningful? And if you bring your written reflections to a close, maybe start typing in the chat box. And we also have time, if you'd like to unmute yourself, we also have time to have your voice into the conversation.
Kristen, I would also like to invite our participants to share also. This is a lot of information that may be new to us. To say, I don't quite get this, or I'm not sure I understand these models. This is okay. This is a learning space. This is a space where we want to give you tools. And so if something is not making sense, then you're not going to walk away with tools. So please feel free to share just where you are at in terms of the information that Kristen is bringing to us today. Diana is sharing that to give a few minutes for the kids to calm down before we react to their situation.
Mm-hmm. Which is sometimes so amazingly challenging.
Yeah. I shared making sure that my children feel safe and loved can create a better learning environment for them.
Mm-hmm. Along with those structures, because the structures are so important as well. I have a slide to help us have 6 ways that we could use some of these tools. I have handouts to teach this to your children as well. So I'll make sure that the link to those handouts are on the chat. I'm looking at myself and switching my screen. So did I just mess up? Let me see. Yes, here we go. So whether we're integrated or disintegrated, we can teach this concept to the adults and children in your life, creating sign language to communicate. So this having the once you teach this to your children, you can, and you don't have to use the big words necessarily. You can just say, when I'm really upset, my hand's down. Or when I'm really upset, my brain loses the ability to really communicate, and I need to calm down and figure out how to move from a disintegrated state to an integrated state, from an angry state to a calm state. If we can teach our children to really recognize their own physiological sensations of upset, that is also a learned skill. I'm angry. Well, when you're angry, do you feel your teeth clench? Do you feel your fists clench? Do you feel yourself get hot? And so they can start acknowledging and recognizing these physical sensations to their emotional sensations, to build their own emotional vocabulary. In our position of relative power in a relationship with a child, watching our own language, talking about, instead of calling behaviors good or bad, which sometimes children can think that they are good or bad because of the behavior, you could try, when you were angry, you yelled. What else could you do next time? And then this idea about co-creating a calming spot or a cool down space where one can go to feel calmer. And then this suggestion is kind of bigger in the world. What if we decided that when we're angry or when we're physiologically dysregulated, we're not going to problem solve until everyone's calmed down.
And there's a suggestion, Kristen, by Diana, that's she says that pictures help with feelings as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to add, Diana, since you brought that up and such an important point, I'll add to the notes for the session that will be available some pictures that are both face pictures as well as drawing pictures for feeling faces so that we can help build our children's emotional vocabulary. I want to open up this space for questions and thoughts. Making sure that anyone who's on the call, maybe you have a particular challenge, and we can walk you through, or maybe you have a question about something. And Norma, I noticed, just said, if you haven't already, please provide your email so you can send out the resources. Thank you, Norma. So as we are thinking about our children in when they are upset, the work of there we go. The work of Tina Payne Bryson, who is an author. She co-authored the book No Drama Discipline and The Whole Brain Child. She offered a three steps to help resolve a tantrum or to show up in a tantrum in a way that's helpful. And that first step is to get down at eye level or heart level, so long as you're safe and so long as everyone else in your care is safe. So as long as safety is not at risk, getting down to eye level or heart level, communicating in some way empathy to the child. So communicating, it looks like you're having a really hard time. It looks like you're really upset or angry or sad. It's beginning to name that emotion. And then communicating in some way, I'm right here with you. I'm here for you. Come find me when you're ready. We can figure this out together. Communicating to that child in your care that you're there and you can help problem solve when they are ready. And I want to share this one particular thought too, that being able to show empathy in that moment doesn't mean that we're not going to go back and talk about the behavior. It doesn't mean we're not going to help them be accountable for apologizing, for making it right, for making amends, for whatever they did when they were angry. In that moment, it allows us to connect and have them feel their humanity before we correct. I'm going to pass by a reflection, and we could talk about one important learning together or how you could use this learning in support to the children in your life or to adults in your life. But I'm going to stop to share the screen to come back to a video with all of us to get connected and see if people have questions, if people would like more information.
And I wonder, Kristen, if we can stop the recording and perhaps open it up to a discussion where people might feel a little bit more comfortable if we stop recording, and perhaps even get some support if needed with the last few minutes of our time together. So
I'm available afterwards, so I can stay on if the conversation gets going.
Okay, so I will stop recording.